Hello and welcome to the 48 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. As always, tonight's episode brought to us by our friends at S2 Cognition. S2 Cognition delivers a revolutionary approach to helping athletes understand how in-game decisions impact their performance from the youth levels all the way to the pros. If you believe that making good decisions is important to being a successful baseball player, you are correct, and S2 Cognition can help you with that. Fitzy, for those listening on the podcast, Fitzy just had some visitors, some guests, which is awesome. So we're joined by three gentlemen that put the try in trifecta: Aaron J. Fitt, Jose Joseph Healy, and Kendall J. Rogers. Fitzy, care to introduce us to your visitors?
Now he knows how I feel. Now he feels like a dad.
I feel like that guy on the famous interview during was it the little girl who comes in like strolling in there? And then,
Love it.
Oh man.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, nice visit from my niece Caroline. A shout out Caroline Grace. She's
nice.
Cute as a button.
Name.
Hey,
awesome.
Runes.
Yes, sir.
Vaden Landers did not pay me to say this, but I was actually watching NFL Live the other day, and they had this whole big thing, like piece on Bryce Young and how like his S2 Cognition score leaked out, and how kind of like Brock Purdy last year, like his cognition score was like through the roof. And so like they're saying now that like because of that like Bryce Young's like definitely going number one because he was off the charts on the S2 scores. So that's pretty interesting, I thought.
I heard in football there's three positions where they really value that. Like one is quarterback, obviously. One is middle linebacker. Those guys have to decipher information and make quick decisions. There was one other position I can't think of, but apparently it's huge in football.
Yeah, so they'll actually be at the College World Series. We'll do some sort of activation with them, but sources are telling me that Kyle Peterson's going to do an S2 Cognition test, and I'm hoping my sources will give me access to his results. I'm very curious to see what we get from that.
I can tell Kyle's doing business with the four of us, so I can tell you right now his decision making's crap. So there you go. You don't even need to activate anything for that.
Whereas the reality is, you're probably right.
Yeah. Hey, Alan. Very good. Boys, I have a inane banter topic for us, and then we'll get to baseball. I was thinking about this. So we're about 48 days from Selection Monday when the postseason begins. So here's my question for you. It doesn't have to be baseball related. Think about a trip. Think about traveling. How many days does the trip have to be in length for you to check a bag? So how long does the trip have to be before you check luggage? Aaron Fitt.
Well, as you guys know, for me, it's not about the length of the trip. It's about the start time of the games. So if I've got a couple of 7 p.m. start times, it means I can play golf in the morning. It means I'm going to check my golf bag.
Oh, wow.
And so if it's a 3-day trip, but I got a couple of 7 o'clock starts, I'm gonna check it back. I'm gonna play some golf.
And do you put like clothes in your golf bag and stuff like that? Do you turn your golf bag into a suitcase?
That's the hack right there. Yeah, I will pull that move once in a while. Yeah, especially like in Omaha, you go for 2 weeks and you wind up getting all this swag, and like your suitcase just like swells. You can just stuff some stuff in the golf bag.
Plus, you got to bring like a dozen Sharpies for autograph sessions and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yeah. Done. Joseph, what do you say?
You know, I for a long time have been on team checked bag because I have a little bit of a two-part answer here. Like I hate the stress of having what they call a rollerboard bag going onto the airplane because you have to fight for bin space, and you know some on the smaller planes you have to gate check it and like get it afterward. So I hate like lugging it through the airport because our closest airport here, Raleigh-Durham, fabulous airport, easy to get in and out of and all that stuff, but not a lot of direct flights to a lot of places, right? So you're almost always laying over in Charlotte or Atlanta, or if you're going to the Midwest, Chicago. I don't want to have to lug that around. So I've always just kind of been like, you know what? I'm just going to check it and be done with it and just have like a light carry-on bag, like a backpack or my laptop bag or whatever. But the game has changed a little bit for me recently. So I'm now working with one of those backpacks that has the expandable closet inside of it.
Whoa.
And I've recently learned how to roll my clothes really tight, and I've gotten kind of good at that. And so now I'm just like, I can stuff like a week's worth of clothes into this collapsible closet, and it has like tightening straps. You can tighten it up really tight. And you put it in this backpack. And so I basically have a suitcase in this backpack, and I take it as a carry-on. So
Wow.
now that being said, like Omaha's a whole different deal because that's there's just like no way you can
Doesn't
avoid.
count, yeah.
You have to check a bag for that. But yeah, for just your average trip now, but anything under a week, I'm pretty good to go now without a check bag.
Joe, I just want to say that's way too sophisticated for an East Texan.
Yeah. Faux East Texan.
I will go ahead and
to
just tell you. I will just go ahead and tell you, and my wife will tell you that I am the worst traveler imaginable because I'm like the person who, when I go to Omaha, I don't know why I do this. It's most people would be stressed and would be like having anxiety, but like when I go to Omaha, like I literally grab like a suitcase and just start throwing shirts in it. Start throwing undergarments, socks, shoes. Like I just throw it all in there. So half the time I get to Omaha and I realize, oh man, I didn't get that. I didn't get this. But for a weekend, like it has to be like 4 or 5 days for me to take anything more than a duffel bag. I figured out like the duffel bag is the way to go, not the roller bag. Because if the duffel bag, like you can be in like an Embraer and like shove it pretty much anywhere. And like it's not like I'm carrying breakables. So like who cares if my clothes are all shoved in a corner of an overhead bin? So that's the way I roll. Duffel bag, team duffel bag over here.
But you're checking that bag, correct?
Absolutely not.
Oh,
No.
you're going
No,
So
bro.
carry on.
I'm going backpack.
Carry
There's
on
no
for
personal
Omaha?
Take on. Oh no, I'm saying like a regular weekend. Like Omaha, I'm
okay,
taking
gotcha.
like the biggest suitcase I can find.
Yeah.
But I'm
and
literally
still
just grabbing
disorganized,
shirts
but
off
still, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
If and I will say this, Rose, if there's no golf involved, I'll go, for a week-long
Yeah.
trip. Pretty sure I can get all that stuff into a carry-on. And like I'm going to avoid checking my bag if at all possible because the airlines are going to screw it up, especially if we got to transfer. They're going to lose my bag. I've been through that too many times. And plus, you got to get there,
God.
you get there super early if you're going to check a bag. You got to get there, 90 minutes early. Whereas I'm pre-check. I can just roll up there, 45 minutes ahead of my flight, and I'm fine. Got priority status. We're good.
I'm pretty certain that's just a you thing, though, having your bags lost. Like, knock on wood, like, Aaron, like, you can set your watch like 3 or 4 times a year that Aaron's going to get a flight canceled and not make it somewhere. And, like, again, I'm knocking on wood.
It's always
the listeners
Omaha,
might be able to
too.
hear this.
Yeah.
Like,
It's bad.
I've never really had that happen. I've never lost a bag. Like, so it's guaranteed to happen now because I said it. But like, I wonder how much of that is just specific to you, the worries about the bag.
Yeah, well, so here's one thing that's really crazy, not to get too crazy off topic here, but like what's hilarious is like Aaron has like the worst luck imaginable. The only time in my life I've ever been close to getting a flight canceled, I was going to Hoover. This is 2 years ago, maybe. Yeah, 2 years ago. And I get to the gate. I'm like way late. I get to the gate like after the last boarding call or whatever. At least I thought it was the last boarding call. Well, I get to the gate. I was like, damn it, I missed my flight. I look up and I see Birmingham still on there. And I'm like, wait, we're not even boarding yet? And I get to the gate and like some kid in the previous flight had spilled their popcorn all over the plane. And so they were cleaning up the popcorn. And that's how I made my flight to Hoover. So that's the kind of luck I have.
Yeah. Boys, I'm going to throw a number at you. So I will check a bag for Omaha. Fitzy,
Okay.
you nailed it. The problem with Omaha is this: you leave with so much stuff. Like you're going to accumulate stuff. My number is 11 days. So 10 days, what I'm doing is I'm packing for 5 and I'm doing laundry. I've become very aggressive in doing laundry in hotels. I don't care if it's not great machinery or soap or whatever. I could care less about that stuff. So I have no faith in the airlines anymore. Here's the other thing where I've gotten to. If I can fly somewhere direct and be within 3 hours of my destination, I'm doing that and driving. Like, done with connections. Okay. And you fly to Hartford, Connecticut enough times and it's just like, it's nightmarish. So anyway, yeah.
Bradley's a delight though. Come on.
Yeah, I don't mind Bradley except for the fact that you every flight going in there is canceled, or it used to be.
Hey, the only question I will not answer about Omaha is how many times I clean up the water bottles in my hotel room.
So say that again, Kendall. You lost me.
How many times I clean up the water bottles in my hotel room? I think last year, by the time we got to the end of Omaha, I think I counted 48 water bottles sitting around my hotel room.
You got to stay hydrated, though. I'm with you. I'm on that game plan.
Well, yeah. So I'm on team. Like, yeah, exactly. So I'm on team. Like when I leave the press box in Omaha, like I just stuff my backpack full of water.
Heck yeah.
Jeff Williams going to come after you if you say that out loud. What are you doing?
That's right.
Sorry,
You're ruining
hey,
for all
that's
of us.
okay.
You start locking the water coolers.
Yes.
They're gonna force everyone, as I showed to the viewers. I have the refillable. They're just gonna replace that cooler in Omaha just with like a tap that you just have to fill your water out of.
Kick it old school. I'm down for that.
Do we want to talk some baseball?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so here's my plan. Yes. So let's start with the Southeastern Conference. I don't want to talk about the whole league. I want to talk about the two big series. So we had LSU at South Carolina, which was, I would say, the series of the year so far. And then we had the Vols at the Vols hosting the Gators. So I have a question for you at the end of this conversation, but I will say this. Last week, I kind of ruined my last week by popping off on this podcast about LSU. I'm going to make a comment. A lot of the things that concerned me about LSU were absolutely highlighted in this series with South Carolina. By the way, Fitzy, your piece on that series was just chef's kiss. I mean, just nailed it. I would recommend that piece for anybody. Fitzy's summary piece of that series, because that series is really impactful. I mean, those are two big time teams. But here's the thing: even though LSU, hey, I'm concerned about the bullpen. It was a concern. I'm concerned about their pitching period outside of Paul Skeens. Yeah, that was a concern. Concerned about their infield defense. It was not good. All those types of things. I leave, if my conviction level in LSU going into the weekend was an 8, I leave it with a 9. Like, that was the first time they had been knocked to the canvas this year. And South Carolina had them on the ropes big time. And they come back and win that game too. So anyway, we can start. Fitzy, why don't you kick us off, because you were there and you wrote about it. But your big takeaways from that series.
Yeah, it was a great series. I don't know if I'd say series of the year, just because I felt like we didn't get a rubber game. We got robbed out of the rubber game, left me like kissing your sister or whatever. But it was compelling. I thought, first of all, South Carolina's for real. We thought that already. I mean, Joe, you've seen the Gamecocks. I think you walked away with the same impression. I love their bullpen, and it's funny I say that in the game. They blew a 4-run lead in the 8th inning, right? But like, you kind of tip your cap to LSU. I mean, like, sure, Kate Austin wasn't super sharp in that inning. Kate Austin's good. I'm not worried about that guy, right? Even the pitch they hit out for a grand slam was a good pitch, 93 down at the knees. And Gavin Dugas just put a great swing on it. But their bullpen is, I mean, Chris Veach was super impressive. They've got so much depth in that bullpen. And if Will Sanders is the version that I saw for 3 innings before the rain moved in on Thursday, that's a difference maker for the Gamecocks. I just think their pitching is real. Especially if that's who Will Sanders is going to be moving forward, and we'll see. But he's got track record now. I mean, I know he struggled in the first half of this season, but that guy has track record of success.
And that breaking ball had depth that night, Fitzy. Like, that was a hammer breaking ball.
Had real teeth. It had real teeth. The changeup was good. Right on right, whatever. Lefties. I mean, like, and he missed bats the fastball too, which I know has been kind of the knock on him. And so, I like LSU's lineup better. I mean, I know South Carolina has hit a ton of home runs this year. I do feel like, there's not as much length for me in that Gamecock lineup as LSU has. Defensively, I mean, you're right, Runes. I mean, you talked about it last week. Like, there are a few things to just wonder about with LSU. I mean, the left side of the infield, Jordan Thompson made a couple of errors. Tommy made, I think, 1 error at third base and also just misplayed a bunt out of position. I mean, like, there's a couple of things that are just like, like elite defenses. It didn't really look like an elite defense on the infield. But that said, like, if you put Trey Morgan at first base, he saves probably a couple of those errors. There was another one, I think, that was thrown away by the catcher that, like, like, if you've got an elite first baseman there, it changes the game. And like, they've got that in their back pocket anytime they need you, and they can pinch hit, Devin Pearson, and slide Morgan to first base in the middle late innings if they want. Like, they've got flexibility, and I think they just need to decide how they're going to play it as we get deeper into the season and into the postseason. The offense for defense trade-off, I think that's fascinating. But, obviously there's some concerns with LSU losing Garrett Edwards this weekend. We don't know yet. I don't know if you guys heard yet if there's an update on his status. It didn't look good. Walked off the mound. I mean, holding his forearm in agony.
Yeah.
Never like to see that. But I mean, with him down and Chase Shores, it sounds like There's some real concern about that one as well. Like those are two big time arms in their bullpen. Like I still think they got enough guys, with just a matter of finding the combinations, like whether they're going to start Griffin Herring. It's like they're kind of starting to lengthen him out as a potential Sunday guy, or they could start, Christian Little and try Thatcher Hurd in the bullpen. They've got enough talent there. It's just a matter of like, can we stretch this all out? I think they're going to be okay. But for me, especially with their schedule coming up ahead, it's a little bit of a concern.
Yep. Kendall, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the guy that stood out to me, and, I've seen LSU so many times already, so I'm not going to talk about LSU. But I think Ethan Petrie, just the way he looked in that series, the thing about South Carolina is like his numbers are phenomenal, but they hadn't played an elite team yet this year. And I think the way he kind of approached the game, his offensive approach in that series is really impressive. I think back to, obviously people are going to talk about the bomb off of Paul Skeens, but I kind of think back to his second home run that he hit that was essentially like golfed on like the inside part of the plate. And he had to really go down and get that ball. It was a great piece of hitting. And so I think my takeaway from that series is that Ethan Petrie's for real. And granted, you look at the numbers, you're like, obviously he's for real. But like there's, Aaron and I were talking about the other day, like remember a few years ago when Wes Clark went berserk in non-conference and, the first couple of weeks SEC played, and he had these outrageous numbers. And then teams figured out, well, he's kind of a bad pitcher bully. Like Ethan Petrie is far from that. Like that was a very advanced approach for a young hitter. Yeah. I loved his attitude. I love the energy that he brought to that lineup. I'm a huge fan of his.
The fact that he could turn on 99 from Paul Skeens, and he could go down and get a good breaking ball, like you said, for the grand slam. It's an advanced approach. And you know what, guys? Just like his presence in the post game was really striking. He's magnetic. It's like it almost is like a little bit reminds me of like a Chris Bryant kind of a personality. It's just really like super charismatic and likable, just easygoing. And I don't know, man, it's special. I think it's special.
Well, and the other thing that I was going to mention too, Aaron, I think Aaron's writing about this later this week, but like he was kind of in a seesaw in the fall, right? Like it was kind of like they kind of saw glimpses. He kind of went, he kind of struggled. He kind of came back. Like he kind of was back and forth, right?
Didn't even have, from what I understand, didn't have a great preseason and didn't start the season in the lineup. The first couple of games, I think he was on the bench, and then and it just kind of clicked. I guess there's an adjustment made with Monty Lee, and boom. It's really a neat story, and obviously he's big and strong, but he came in as a two-way guy, and I was talking with some scouts on the plate down there, and kind of giving him a hard time, like, guys, like, do your jobs. Why is this guy in college? Like, do your job. And they were like, hey, man, like these guys, they turned him in as a pitcher, and it was like, this guy was like not regarded this highly as a position player. They liked him more as a pitcher than as a hitter coming out of high school. So it's just a wild story.
It is tricky though. Like he's a corner player who's a right-handed hitter, right? And there's a lot of those dudes, and it's just like it's so hard. And then if he's a two-way player, that complicates it. I'll tell you the other thing that South Carolina did. Like, if you're going to beat Skeens, you better be on time for that fastball first time through the order. And they were. Yep. Petrie, Wimmer did it. Petrie got a 3-1 fastball. Wimmer got a 1-0 fastball.
And neither one of them were opposite field. Like, they were on time. They were ready for it, and they pulled it.
Yeah, no question. Hey, by the way, boys, I'm starting a campaign. I'm hearing people say Gavin Dugas. It's Gavin Dugas. Like, you pronounce the S. Coach Neal got roasted about that last year, which that was kind of funny. But no,
well, you think about like Cajun dialect, and you would like Dugas sounds right, but it's Dugas.
Yeah, that's right. It's Dugas.
Over the years, I think I'm about 50% Dugas and 50% Dugas.
It's funny.
I might have gotten it wrong just now, but like I never know what to say.
That's all right. You just keep flipping it in there.
I wonder how David Cipher would say it.
Just flip it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've heard Dugas like by 5 different people over the last week. Obviously a lot of people talking about LSU, and then you start to question yourself, like, isn't it Dugas? I literally just looked it up. Jose, what say you about this series?
I'll be brief. A couple things to clean up. One is that Garrett Edwards got his MRI today as we record, but no definitive thing on that. Leah Van, their beat writer, had a quote from Jay Johnson that said basically that the preliminary trainer evaluation, which is just literally a trainer poking around at his arm, to be clear about that, but was about as positive, in his words, and I'm paraphrasing, about as positive as it could be. Now, we'll see on the MRI, but basically no real definitive statement on that, but it did sound like there was some optimism, at least.
Yep.
Aaron mentioned Chris Veach, and I just really like him. First of all, shout out to the Presbyterian Blue Hose.
Oh, go Hose.
But it's like he's the answer to the question, like, what if you built the entire plane out of changeups? Like because that's like all it is, just like changeup. And like I think I mentioned, I put this in our group, little WhatsApp group, when that Friday game was happening. It's like the entire time he was in there, it was just LSU betting on like eventually he's going to throw a fastball, right? And Chris Veach just being like, nope, here comes another changeup, slower than the last one.
It was amazing. And then he's doing it against like real hitters like Dylan Cruz. Like, here you go, right on right changeup. Here it comes. Like, trying to hit it.
Not all chase changeups either. Like, he could throw it for a strike. It was it was not just slow too. It was going sideways. It was nasty.
Some of those were real like nasty screwball movements. I mean, it was
seriously.
To me, I'll tell you what, metrics wise, at least spin rate wise, it's very similar to Bryce Jarvis's change. Remember Bryce Jarvis had like that, like it's like a legit 70 changeup for Duke. That was a high spin, like 2,300 RPM changeup. This one is even more. It's like 24, 25. You might see a 2,600 RPM changeup, which you just don't see that. Most changeups are like 15, 1,700. Like this, it's just a totally different pitch. And I don't understand like the mechanics behind that, what makes it do that, but like he throws it with such conviction and the freaking thing just disappears. It's an awesome pitch.
Yeah.
My final thought on this is that while both teams were probably disappointed not to get a third game in, I think ending with a split is kind of a way in which both teams can walk away feeling pretty good about it, right? I mean, LSU got a road win and a comeback road win at that. Have to feel pretty good about punching back when they got knocked down, like you said, Runes. And then South Carolina went toe-to-toe with what we think is the best team in college baseball right now and didn't look out of place and split with them and have to feel pretty good about that, on top of Will Sanders looking good, all that stuff. So, yeah, you'd prefer to get that third game. I know I was disappointed not to get a third game, but I think both teams can walk away feeling like, you know what, we got kind of something that we wanted out of that.
Yep.
Yeah, can I also add real quick on South Carolina? A couple of South Carolina fans got after me pretty good about our rankings today and about how South Carolina didn't jump Vanderbilt. By the way, just do me a favor. Like, go look at Vanderbilt's resume right now and compare it to South Carolina's, and then come back to me and let's have the discussion. You know what? If you can convince me that South Carolina's resume is better than Vanderbilt's, like, you deserve a lot of money, because that's going to be pretty hard to do. So the good thing is we can prove it this, like, they can prove it this weekend. Like, for whatever reason, like, South Carolina fans, like, Arkansas would be the team for me if I'm a South Carolina fan that, like, I'm comparing resumes to. Wake and, teams like Vanderbilt are not the teams I'd be comparing.
Well, I mean, LSU, Wake Forest, Florida, Vanderbilt, the top four teams in the rankings, none of those teams have lost a weekend. There's just plain no way you can make a case to jump South Carolina over all those teams based on splitting a series at home with LSU. Like, we dominated the whole series, like, except for one inning. Well, you didn't win the series, like, you split it. You were at home. I mean, like, you could give LSU just as much credit for salvaging, a road series split, for coming from behind and winning a game that they shouldn't have won. Like, versus, you almost won the series. Well, yeah, you almost won it, but you didn't. It's like, we're not gonna make South Carolina number one based on almost winning a series. No, that's not how it works.
I think there's a good lesson for South Carolina in this series, because you got a little ahead of yourself. Like, it was. I think, that win over LSU is emphatic for South Carolina. But if I'm Mark Kingston, man, I don't know if I've slept since that second game. Like, that was a real opportunity that was right there for the taking. That said, like, LSU's players deserve a ton of credit for that. I've just been very focused on the dominance of their talent in some areas and my concerns in other areas. And what I've missed is kids like Dylan Cruz and Gavin Dugas and Jordan Thompson are real gamers. Like, those kids are fighters, and they fought like they were bloodied up winning that game. Like, that was really their mettle that they showed in that game was very impressive. Let me fast forward us to the Vols and the Gators. I'm going to ask you a question at the end of this. I'm going to make a shot at summarizing this. 2 weeks in a row, I'm worried that Tennessee's position player group wasn't sure if they were up for taking on an LSU or a Florida. And then game 3, they kind of settled in and kicked some butt. I'm worried about Tennessee's position player group. They're just not matured yet. I like the talent. I just don't, man, it's taken them too long to get into these series. Drew Beam is their best pitcher right now. That's wild. I'm not wild, but it just, he's their Sunday guy. And then for Florida, I love this position player group. I think that group feels like they can trade punches with anybody. But the problem is Jack Caglione can't start on Sundays anymore, right? Like his last 4 starts, he's thrown 12 innings and he's walked 19 guys or some crazy number like that. Like he's untenable on the front end of that rotation. You guys can address that series as you answer this question. Here's the question I got for you guys. Over under those 4 teams, LSU, South Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, those 4, right? Or Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, you know what I'm saying? Vols, Gators, LSU, South Carolina, those 4 teams.
One more time, do it again. Yeah. One more time. Can you do it?
Yeah, LSU. No, the 4 teams in these 2 series. The over-under for Omaha is 2.5. So those 4 teams, South Carolina and LSU, Florida and Tennessee, over-under is 2.5. How many of them are making it to the College World Series? Joe, what say you?
I'll go under, and it has less to do with the teams individually and more just like if you give me any 4 teams and tell me that more than half of those 4 teams are going to get to Omaha, I think the safe bet, if I were a betting man and I'm not, I think the safe bet is the under there, just because you're essentially taking the field in a lot of cases. And I'm with you about the concern about Tennessee, and I think there's if you're an SEC extra subscriber, and if you're not, what are you even doing? Honestly, at this point, I'm tired of asking you. Just do it already. Mark Etheridge, my colleague over there, had a great piece on a couple weeks ago on coming out of the series he saw against LSU for Tennessee. They essentially addressed that. Like, this is just a different team, and it's time that we kind of engage with that in a serious way. I think we're past the point of just waiting for these guys to recapture the magic from last season. Doesn't mean they can't be great. Doesn't mean they can't get to Omaha. All those things are on the table, but this is just a different team, and it's not going to be as microwave ready as at least I thought it would be. I kind of thought this would be, hey, let's just rebuild it on the fly and take off with some portal guys and some development pieces and all that. And it just hasn't been that easy. And I think both Florida and Tennessee have questions to answer in the rotation, because I agree with you on Jack Caglione, and because it's not affecting him offensively, clearly, I'd be tempted to just throw him in the bullpen as a back end piece. And let's remember, when Pierce Coppola was going to be the 3rd starter in this Florida rotation, that was kind of what they thought Cags might do, is be a back end guy. The stuff is, and you can treat him with what I like to call the old Georgia Tech Zach Maxwell rule, which is as long as you strike out 3 before you walk 4, we're golden. You give him a clean inning and let him just air it out, right? I'd be tempted to see what that looks like. And on the other side, sure, Dolander's not been as good as the expectation was, but I think mostly he's been okay. The thing is, Burns, though, his ERA now is over 11 in his SEC starts, and it's not just clustering hits together. It's not that he's walking, the entire lineup. He's just getting hit really hard. Mm-hmm. And to me, that seems a little bit untenable. And if with Florida, you can at least make the argument on behalf of Cags with like, hey, we're still winning series. Like, let's give this kid, and I use kid specifically because it's just the inexperience, to work it out, because we're still winning series. We're still mostly winning games. Let's let him work through this. And I think there might be some value in that. But with Burns, it's like, well, you're not really winning the series against the best teams on your schedule. And it's kind of starting to pile up on you. I mean, they're 5-7 now in the league. We're approaching halfway point of SEC play. And they've got options, right? Camden Sewell is healthy now. Xander Sechrist is great as their midweek guy. We saw how much better Will Sanders looked after just kind of a week off to kind of just like reset. And like, maybe that's all he needs, because it's not like Burns's velo is down 10 miles an hour. Right. I don't know, but both teams kind of have a similar issue there, where there's one guy that it just feels like maybe we need to try something else here.
Fitzy, what are you thinking here? Over or under 2.5?
I think my nature is to agree with Joe about the, just the logic of it. All right. Like, mathematics probably against us here, but I'm going to take the over anyway, because I just think that those 3 teams, I believe in them all, those 4 teams. And actually, like, Tennessee is a team I'm buying right now. Like, 5-7 in the league, their stock is probably as low as it's going to get. I'm buying. I mean, I just believe that those 3 weekend rotation arms will get it figured out, and Frank Anderson will get them figured out. Sure, they haven't. You're right, Joe. I mean, you're right. Like Burns in particular, that's a concern. But like you look at the strikeout walk rates for those two guys, and they're both still like good. I mean, like the peripheral, the numbers that are typical like indicators of success are there, like the Sierras or whatever, the FIPS, like the advanced metrics that you can find at D1Baseball.com suggest that these guys should be way better than their ERAs are. And to me, that just kind of matches what I see with my eyeballs, which is like their stuff is still really good. I'm gonna go to war with those horses, man. I mean, like when we get to June, I'm gonna ride those teams that have real dudes on the mound, and I think Tennessee still does. And so I think LSU's an Omaha team. I think Florida's an Omaha team. Tennessee and South Carolina, they all feel like Omaha caliber teams. I think 3 of them find a way to get there.
KR, what say you? 2.5 over under.
Ooh. I'll go with the under. I'll go with 2.
It's a safer play.
Yeah, I just feel like, so the issue South Carolina will have is like I actually feel like there are several like good teams in the Carolinas that they could end up getting matched up with that can knock them out of the postseason. And I just think with Tennessee, like I don't know, this team just feels a little different to me. And like I'm with Fit, I believe in the pitching staff, but I just don't think, offensively, I mean, like they're not very consistent. Like, yeah, they hit really well in like the series finale against LSU in Florida, but overall it's not an ultra consistent lineup. So I'm not a believer in that just yet.
I'm going to take I think the under is the smart play, like Fitzy said. I'm going to take the over just because I think these 4 teams are really, really good. Here's like Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson have a real choice to make because, if you're getting aggressive and getting ahead of yourself, you're thinking about a super regional. Drew Beam can't be your 3 starter. Like, you can't not pitch him in a super regional, right? I can make a case he's their best starter right now. He's not their most talented starter, although he'd be the most talented starter on like 97% of rosters in college baseball. But could you imagine, like, how would you sleep the following summer if you were in a super regional and Drew Beam didn't make a start? There's no way you could live with yourself. So if you need to adjust that needs to be adjusted now, right? Like that. Maybe it's easy, right? Maybe Chase Burns, to your point, Joe, gets a week off, throw him in the pen. He's still got a beautiful arm, but I'm going to take the over. Hey, let me give you guys a Jack Caglione stat, and then we'll keep going. Jack Caglione is so fascinating. He has 6 walks in 150 plate appearances. 6. That's a walk percentage of 4. And that's like. The national average is like 11. And so he's whatever, a third of that. And so I think of a power hitter like that. What are you going to do? He's literally the scariest hitter in college baseball. So you're not going to throw him a strike, right? So no one's throwing him strikes and he won't take walks. It is the oddest combination of phenomenon that I can think of right now. And yet he's still so ridiculous that
he's like a young Vladimir Guerrero.
Seriously. But you could argue Vladimir Guerrero. I don't know how many home run titles he won, but it felt like his swinging at everything might have hurt that a little bit. I don't know. I always feel like if you're going to be a great home run hitter, you got to swing at strikes. People don't want to throw you strikes, so you got to take the balls. Jack Caglione will not let you walk him, but when he makes contact, it doesn't stay in the stadium very often either. So I don't know. That will be very interesting. All right, boys, let's go to the Big 12. Here's my question on the Big 12. I had a lot of questions, but, more confusing results this weekend. West Virginia loses a series to Kansas. Kansas got 5 wins in the league. Under Dan Fitzgerald, they only had 4 all of last year. Texas Tech gets run off their own field by North Dakota State. Who, by the way, was 7-20 entering that game. Texas Tech did win the series, to be clear. Texas was very they played a very hotly contested series with Kansas State, almost lost that series. Oklahoma State gets beat by TCU on the road, and Oklahoma State's got some serious injury concerns, I guess, on both sides, right? Like Nolan McLean's still out. We don't know, but Ian Doherty's going to be coming back. I think that really helps him at catcher. Here's my question for you guys on the Big 12. Go wherever you want with this. Is there a team in this league that can get hot and pull away, or is this just what we're going to have for the rest of the year? Kendall, what say you?
This is going to be what it's going to be the rest of the year. I mean, I think Oklahoma State is a team I have the most conviction on. But the problem that Oklahoma State has is as long as Nolan McClain is out and they're just relying on, Isaac Stebbins at the back end of that bullpen, every single night on the weekend, like he's going to get worn out. And we already saw, him, signs of cracking a little bit with him and that series decider against TCU. He came out of the bullpen, was not very sharp. TCU hit him hard. And that's really the first time all year he's gotten hit like that. So I now have some concerns about the back end of that Oklahoma State bullpen if they're going to have to use Stebbins that often, especially as we kind of, get to, mid to late April and into May. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's going to be used pretty extensively. So if everybody was healthy for Oklahoma State, I would like their chances to probably pull away here. But TCU, I get that they're a tough team to figure out. It's like one weekend they're terrible, the next weekend they're really good. I think they'll stay in the mix. I think Texas at this point, you've got to start believing in them. I mean, even tonight as we record this on Monday, they went on the road and shut down a really good Texas State offense. And so, I mean, Woody Williams has done a phenomenal job with that pitching staff to get them, as a top 5, 7 team in the country in ERA. If you're pitching at that high of a level, you got to feel like they're going to stay in that mix as well. And then there's also, by the way, Texas Tech. I mean, I get that they're 4 and 5 in the league, but you can bet that they're going to stay in the mix. So I think those 4 teams will be jockeying for position the rest of the way. I just think Oklahoma State, for me, they get a little bit erratic sometimes. It's not always the prettiest, and that can cause cause a team to lose some series.
Fitzy, what say you on this? Someone's pulling away, or it's going to be slogfest?
Yeah, I think Kendall nailed it. It just feels like if it was going to be a pull away situation, I think Oklahoma State would have won that series, against TCU this past weekend. And the fact that they didn't, and they're sitting here now at 7-5, and Nolan McClain's status is in question. It's just going to be one of those years where it feels like all these teams are going to beat up on each other, and we're probably going to wind up with just maybe 2 hosts out of the Big 12 and probably no top 8 seeds is how I see it playing out. I just don't think there's an elite team right there.
Well, it could be like TCU. We could end up in a situation like last year where the Big 12 champion didn't even host.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because if you look at like TCU and TCU right now, they wouldn't host. If Texas Tech went on a run, Texas Tech's RPI right now, guys, like 68.
Oof.
Like they pretty much have no shot to host at this point because of that. Like, I mean, I think I looked today that if they won the rest, like if they went undefeated the rest of the way, they could get in like the top 32 or they get in the top 16. But they'd have to go undefeated. So, they're in a bad situation. Then you have, Oklahoma State teetering there at like 19, 20, Texas is 16. So you essentially have 2 teams right now that you feel like, hey, they can be in the mix to host, and TCU's right there in the mix. So you're in a position now, again, where you could have a champion of that league not host.
Joe, what's your take here?
I hate to just totally agree on this for the sake of interesting podcasting, but I agree. Like, I just think this league is going to be a mess, and it's not just the results at the top I would point to. I would point to some of the results at the bottom. Like Baylor has already won series against Kansas State and Oklahoma, and we know Oklahoma's talented enough to get somebody. It just hasn't necessarily happened yet. Texas is technically leading the conference, but they're one like Kansas State bullpen meltdown this past weekend away from losing that series to Kansas State. So I just think I don't think anybody's running away with anything this year. And the other thing that happens in the Big 12 is that, they only play 24 league games, and, 40% of the league roughly has already played 12. There's just not a lot of time for anybody to pull away here. Although in classic, something that drives Runes nuts, there's, teams that have played 12 games and teams that have played 9 conference games. And there's West Virginia who's played 6. So it just, it's kind of hard to follow, to be honest, as Runes has made the point before. But long story short, I co-sign everything that everybody has said. It's just, this is going to be what it is. And I'm with Kendall that this feels a lot like last year, where there's going to be some Big 12 club that we feel pretty good about that's going to get to the end of the season, whether they win the league or not. They're going to be 15-9, but the RPI is going to be 31, and we're just going to, I think it's a carbon copy of what we saw last year in the league. And I'm not smart enough to tell you whether that's good or bad or whatever for the league. I don't know if it means there's good parity or if it means the league is down. I don't know, but I think it is what it is.
Yeah. Let me make a pitch for you guys on, so I had Kansas and West Virginia on Sunday, Easter Sunday. First of all, Cole Elvis, the catcher for Kansas. He's actually playing first base because they don't have enough depth at catcher. They can't DH him because they don't have enough catching, so they play him at first in case Jake English gets hurt. Cole Elvis got the California Highway Patrol mustache. He's just a bad body, awesome player. Like total leader. Like anyway, I'm all in on Cole Elvis. If Dan Fitzgerald told us he's like the greatest kid you ever met. So West Virginia.
First of all, I mean, bad body is subjective. Let's say, first of all, there's no such thing as bad bodies.
Well said.
There's
He's got a catcher.
There's just different bodies.
Different bodies. That's
How
right.
dare
Well
you.
said. Thank you. Thank you for that. He's got a catcher body. You can read into that however you like. So let me tell you guys about West Virginia. They have a very specific formula. I like this team very much. So Ben Hampton and Blaine Traxel. I mean, these are two. Blaine Traxel leads the country in innings. Ben Hampton's in the top 35. So their formula is those guys go deep. They save the bullpen. They've moved Carlson Reed to closer, and it's just like 95 to 97 with a weird changeup. He's been dominant as the closer. And this kid, Robbie Porco, that threw on Sunday against Kansas, 6'8" freshman from the Philly area. He touched 97. I'm telling you, it's an elevator shaft fastball. It is downhill. He throws a split because he's this big kid with enormous. He struck out 12 in 6 innings. Now, can he repeat it? I don't know. His ERA was 8 going into the game. Now it's 6. But and West Virginia, there's not a team in the country that wouldn't want to have J.J. Weatherholt. He's better in person. He's so freaking good. I'm telling you, he's so good. Left-handed hitter, feel for the game off the charts, laser beams all over the field. He is so good. Like just the it factor, like super confident. So anyway, West Virginia, the rest of their position player group is very athletic and runnerish and drive balls in the gap. Dane Leonard is a 5th-year senior catcher. Like West Virginia's got a lot of things that I really, really like. And think about those starters. Like Hampton's this crafty lefty, and Traxel's like this 5'0" sidearm guy with shifting slots. Then the next day you're facing a right-hander throwing off the 5th floor of a office building. So anyway, West Virginia was very, very interesting. Can they win the league? I think they can. Will they win the league? Obviously that's unlikely, but I really liked my look at West Virginia. They are fascinating, fun team.
And yet they lost the series.
And that's the point of the Big 12 is there's no comfortable game. Even Baylor and Kansas, who are the underdogs in the league, are actually the underdog in the league is Oklahoma, right? Like there's not a comfortable weekend in that league. I don't think there is. Like a good version. Hey, Kansas with the transfers they pulled in, that's not a young team, boys. Like they've got some names you'd recognize, and they're very interesting. They're just not very deep. Go ahead, Joe.
I just looked at like this JJ Weatherholt guy is pretty good. You're right. Like I feel so like I knew he was good. Like I've seen the numbers, but I just looked up their stat sheet and like, oh my god,
yeah, like his stolen base numbers are silly. And like
he's stolen 26 bases. He's only struck out 12 times. He's hitting almost 450. He's got 15 doubles. Like, geez.
I'm just telling you guys the at bats. Like he led off the game yesterday. I think it was his first at bat. And Kansas was throwing this lefty Ethan Bradford, and first fastball he saw, he literally spins Ethan Bradford's cap. Like zoom, line drive, just zoom right by his ear. And you're like if you're Bradford, what are you supposed to do with that, right? Like first fastball you throw, and it's like next, you didn't even see it. You heard it go past you. And you're just like, oh man, it is. His takes are so comfortable. He looks bored on his takes. Like, nah. I mean,
can I tell you what takes don't look good? By the way, not to just get off West Virginia here, but my pick for John Spikerman for Breakout Player of the Year. Oklahoma, by the way, lost a series. This is a team that we thought not necessarily would win the Big 12, but we thought was, frankly, we thought would be a borderline top 25 type of club this year. And they lose a series to Baylor over the weekend. They're almost 500. They're 3-6 in the league. And by the way, John Spikerman hitting 192 with a 325 OBP. Like if you had told me before the season that those would be his numbers, like I would have bet you anything that would not be his season.
No.
He was a star in the postseason, right?
Yeah.
Did I miss that? Like he was
crazy.
He was a great player in the postseason, like future star. Like your pick was that's a smart pick, Kendall.
288 slugging percentage.
I was all in on him, and he looks the part. He's strong in addition to being fast, and
Yeah,
I don't understand it. I don't get it.
crazy. Hey, boys, before we go to the ACC, I want to mention another partner, Blast Baseball, ready to dominate the plate, question mark. Well, here's what you do. Blast Baseball is trusted by more MLB and college teams than any other hitting solution. The Blast sensor attaches to the knob of any bat, provides real-time feedback with every swing. Go to blastmotion.com, enter the code D1Baseball at checkout. You'll get $10 off. D1Baseball at checkout, save $10. Thanks to our friends at Blast Baseball. We're gonna put a blast sensor on Kendall's book bag at the press box in Omaha for all the waters we're slogging out of there. Even though I'm doing the same thing. All right, boys, ACC. Here's the question. Go wherever again. You've got carte blanche here, but here's my question: the ACC. Wake Forest and Virginia are the two best teams. Okay, we're good. The next tier, I want to pick 3 teams for the next tier. I don't know who to pick. I've got ideas. So that's what I want to know. Tier 2, like for instance, is Louisville, are they back? Because they swept BC in 3 very close games, by the way. So that's my question. We got Wake and Virginia kind of by themselves. If they don't play each other, do they play each other? Does anybody know? They got to play each other, right? They're in different divisions, I think. Anyway.
I don't know if they do.
Oh, that would be tragic.
They do not. They do not.
Oh, that's awful. So here's the question. Give me your next 3 teams in the ACC. Doesn't have to be in order. You want to go, Fitzy?
I do think Louisville's in that mix.
Yeah.
For me, I feel pretty confident about that. And you're right. Yeah, it does get tricky after that. I'm going to go with North Carolina. Still believe in that team overall. They're not perfect, but I think they're still pretty good. And here's my curveball I'll throw at you guys. I'm taking NC State. End of the day, I'm taking NC State as one of those top 5 teams in that league. And I know they're 5-9. You look at their series in the league. I think they've lost 3 of their first 4 series. Fine. You guys can sell. I'm buying NC State. They're about to make a big time run. We got Florida State at home, Clemson at home the next 2 weekends. And then they've got at Notre Dame, at North Carolina versus Pitt. I think this team winds up getting closer to the regional hosting category than the bubble when it's all said and done. I think they can make a real postseason run. I really like their roster. I love their position player group, and I think they're actually better on the mound than maybe I thought they would be heading into the year. The record right now doesn't reflect it, but I'm buying the Wolfpack. So for me, they're in that top 5.
Fitzy, you left out your Fighting Boston College Westminster Crackers. I mean, that must
I
that
didn't like to do it. I didn't like to leave them out, but if
it hurt you more than it hurt them.
If we're buying or selling for the end of the year, I just have more faith in those other teams.
Yeah,
long term.
That's fair. Very fair. Kendall, you want to go next? Who's your next 3?
Yeah, I'll go with. I agree with Aaron on North Carolina. I actually agree with Aaron on NC State, especially when you look at those guys from an offensive standpoint. And Williston's having a really nice year for them. And then for the last team, I'll actually stick with Boston College. The thing about BC is when you look at those guys overall. You look at the Louisville series, all 3 of those games were ultra competitive. And so until that point, they hadn't lost a weekend series. And in that 3-game set, every single one of those games came down the 9th inning. So I think that actually kind of told me a lot more about those guys that, hey, we already thought they were pretty good. But the fact that those 3 games were all dogfights on the road at a place that, Louisville's really good at home, that tells me that team's pretty good. And so until they prove otherwise, I'm kind of riding with them. And I think Miami, you look at Miami, they still have several road series left, and Duke. I'm not. Who knows what to kind of make of them overall? They've kind of gone back and forth, and don't get me started on Georgia Tech's pitching. So yeah, I'll go with Boston College.
So you don't have Louisville. You don't have Louisville in your top 5 of the ACC then.
Yeah, I would have Louisville in my top 5.
So you have to pick one of the Carolinas then.
Because you said UNC, NC State, and BC.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would have Louisville in there. Yeah. So sorry. Well, I guess BC's going to drop off.
Look at you. Just lead on the Eagles and then
I'm trying to make more people happy. Come on.
Leave them at the altar. Goodness. Joe, what say you?
Well, I'll try to mix it up a little bit here, but I will say Louisville is the one I have the most conviction in. I really like their 1-2 in the rotation. They've got some questions on the mound beyond that, but I think maybe I haven't been giving them enough credit for having just a really good 1-2 at least. I mean, that's better than they were last year, right? And that ended up being a super regional team. Last year, they had far more questions in the rotation than what they've shown so far. So they're just a lot more solid there. The North Carolina pick is a good one too. And the biggest thing for me with them is that this is just kind of what UNC is. And I mean that as a compliment, I guess, that it rarely looks pretty. And we always kind of look at it and go like, who do I like on the pitching staff here? But it just is what it is. They're going to cobble it together. They're going to use about 11 billion pitchers every weekend. And the position player group I really like, and they may have actually underachieved a little bit just statistically with what I think that lineup is capable of. They still got some guys that are scuffling a little bit. I'll throw Miami a bone here as well, even though I do generally agree with the logic of NC State. For those who are not watching the video, you missed me nodding vigorously when Aaron said NC State because I saw it coming too. It's just a very navigable schedule. Miami has a little bit of the same thing going on in terms of having a navigable schedule. Chiefly, they have 7 conference losses. 6 of them have been to Wake Forest and Virginia. Now, would you have loved to at least gotten a game in those series? Absolutely. But those 2 series are behind them already. So, I think there is an opportunity there where they're just going to be more talented than a vast majority of the teams they're going to play the rest of the way. You still got to win the games, but I think for a similar logic reasons as NC State, I think Miami's kind of in that same mix.
That's good. I'm, you know what? I'm just convicted on BC that they're going to be there, and I just want to pick them, so I'm going to pick them. Louisville is so interesting. I think what gives me conviction on Louisville is I actually don't love their position player group anymore, and I'm starting to feel better about their pitching. Like Carson Liggett has been great. They've got options if Greg Ferrone keeps struggling. They don't have to pitch him. The Ryan Hawks kid is dependable for sure. It doesn't feel like a vintage Louisville position player group. I don't know. I like them. I just don't love them like I normally love a Louisville position player group. It's like not having a Dalton Rushing in there it feels like this massive void that I didn't see coming. But all that said, I'm gonna bet on Louisville every single time. If my question is their position players, I love that that's my question. So I'm gonna go Louisville, Boston College. To your point, Joe, I want to pick Miami, but those 2 sweeps are hard to look past. I'm going NC State. I'm with you, Fitzy. Like NC State, I love the look of that position player group. I like this may be blasphemous. I like NC State's position players better than Louisville's. They're more physical. They're
absolutely.
Yeah. I wish Louisville was more physical. Yeah. They're just not that big, anyway, interesting, but give me those. It's going to be fun. That's another league that could be full of surprises. How about the Pac-12, boys? Any big takeaway from the Pac-12? Oregon State climbs back in there. It's hard to eliminate teams outside of Cal and Utah right now. Arizona State just still hanging tough. They're interesting. Joe, why don't we start with you? Any takeaway on the Pac?
This might be the league. Obviously, I'm these days paying most attention to the SEC given my specific role, but the league that I'm having the most fun kind of following beyond that is right now the Pac-12. Because again, as I've mentioned before, I am one of the 12 people that has the Pac-12 network. So I do watch a decent amount of, because, those games are on at midnight when I'm writing something and everything else is over. So that's kind of nice. Nice little companion for late nights. But this feels a little like 2016 in the Pac-12. Now, the circumstances are different because you remember 2016 was the year Utah won the league. And might not have been an at-large team had they finished second. But those were back in the days when the Pac-12 didn't do a tournament, and so they got the auto bid. That obviously is no longer the case, but a team like USC could do something similar. And Arizona State looked like they might be that team, but they're playing well enough now that it looks like they're going to be an at-large team as well. But so there's just kind of some funky things happening in this league. Washington maybe is kind of also in that mix. It seems like there's a group of Pac-12 teams that are competing at the top of the league that don't necessarily have the metrics. And then there's the teams that are most talented, some of which are competing at the top, like Stanford, and some of which have just, fallen a little flat and been a little more up and down. So it's a league I'm kind of having the hardest time wrapping my arms around. But that also makes it a lot of fun to follow.
Oh,
go ahead, Aaron.
I agree. I mean, I think it's fascinating. Stanford. I mean, I've been saying all year since the fall. I think probably all of us thought this way, that it was Stanford and UCLA than everyone else. And at this point in the season, it's time to wonder if that take is still valid. I mean, I think Stanford has lived up to its billing. They're 10-2 in the league with a 14 RPI. Like, they're on track to host a regional. And heck, UCLA, I mean, metrics wise, 11 in the RPI, 8-5 and 1 in the conference. Like, they're behind USC and Arizona State, but I mean, like, they're still in better shape than either one of those teams when it comes to postseason positioning. And ultimately, I still think I have the most faith in those two teams. I do wonder how the second half shakes out for ASU and USC as the schedule gets more challenging. Like, I think it's a neat story that those two teams have gone off to these strong starts, but if you look ahead for both of them, it gets a lot harder the rest of the way. I mean, it's really like, I think that they built enough of a cushion at this point that you would think they could still probably be regional teams, but like, I don't think I have faith in either one of these teams as a host. And it's fascinating with Oregon and Oregon State. Like, this weekend, we just saw the Beavers kind of resuscitate their position. Now they've won 3 series in a row. They're still not 500 in the league, but they're up to 7-8. RPI is still not great, but 55, okay, like, they're in the mix. Oregon, though, like, despite losing that series at home against the Beavers, they're still in better shape. They're 7-5 in the conference with a 13 RPI, and so it's like it feels like it's just hard for these teams to kind of separate from each other.
Yeah, go ahead, Kendall.
I think what's really fascinating about this league is I feel like there's so many years of the pack that we look at like the top 4 or 5 teams and then go, man, I don't think this league is very good. And I think this year you look at this league overall and you're like, man, I like a lot of teams in this league. I mean, so here are 2 kind of points I will make is, we just talked about how Oregon State's won 3 straight series. They won series from Washington, and Oregon the last 2 weekends. Yet they're still 4.5 games behind Stanford, Arizona State in the standings. Like, that's a lot of games to be behind teams at this point in the season. And so I think you look at that, and I think you look at this league as one that has 8 or 9 solid clubs. I think Arizona, and I get like Chip Hell's club has not played great, but they're still a team when you look at them personnel wise. They're 5-10 in the lead. They're 16-13 overall. But I can tell you this: they could get in a regional and win a regional. Like, everything needs to kind of go right for them. But like, they have the personnel to win a regional. So when you have a team that's near the bottom of those standings that you think can win a regional, that is what I call a good and deep league. And frankly, if Ian May doesn't get hurt for California earlier this year, like, they're not a bad club. So I'd actually really like the mold of this league this year. I think it's deep. And I think right now, as I'm looking at it, I mean, you could legitimately look at 7 teams that I think could be postseason worthy at the end of the year. I don't think you can get to an 8th. I think you can end up having 7 teams in the discussion at least.
I'm with you, Kendall. Like, that's my takeaway thought from this league is I think there are 9 regional caliber rosters, but to your point, the math is not going to work, right? Like, there's just not enough teams taking losses for that to work. But like, there are 9 teams, everyone besides Cal and Utah right now, that are capable of getting on a heater. And I love that you mentioned Arizona, Kendall. Like, you don't want to play Arizona. Like, they ran Washington off the field game 2 and 3. Like, they didn't just beat them; they beat them bad. And so that league is going to be, that conference tournament is another one that's going to have big ramifications.
It'll be great. Yeah. And in a hat tip to Arizona State, I mean, this is a team that frankly was not very good last year. There were a lot of rumors in the offseason they were going to, make some coaching staff changes and things like that. They stuck to the process. They stuck to the plan. They're now 23-9 and 10-2 in the league. So major kudos to those guys.
And I am
go ahead, Fitzy.
And I am starting to believe that ASU is like a legitimate postseason team, which I was skeptical just because of the schedule and the fact that they struggle in the non-conference. Like, they got swept by Irvine at home. They lost those 2 games to Oklahoma State. Mississippi State lost a series too. It was like, it took me a while to come around on this team, but the way they're pitching right now is encouraging to me. And I think Washington State, is a team that has some ability, and to really shut those guys down in a 3-game sweep this weekend was my attention. And so I think I've become a believer in ASU as a team that has staying power as a postseason caliber team. But again, watch out for the schedule now. We got at Washington, we got the Beavers, at Oregon, Stanford, at USC, UCLA. plus a couple of midweekers against Fullerton, who's playing good baseball. So I mean, it's not easy, man.
One thing I'll say about Arizona State, boys, is they're not a historic power, at least under Willie Bloomquist, where there's the traditional clutching of pearls. Like, hey, why can't things be the way they used to be? Like Willie, who's never spent a day in college baseball outside of his playing career, like has embraced the full modern 2023 college baseball experience. I mean, nobody got after it in the portal, like them compared. It's LSU and them.
Other
right?
than LSU is Arizona State,
Yeah.
which is kind of shocking, but they nailed the portal.
Yeah, so I will see them play Grand Canyon tomorrow. I can't wait to see that. But hey, a couple other things. Cal State Fullerton wins a huge series over Santa Barbara. You guys covered that in the Nerdcast. By the way, first Nerdcast of the year. Amen. So great to have the Nerdcast back in the mix. We consider DBU and USM, Southern Miss are both. They're just clipping along, winning weekends, playing great. They're right on it's basically teams 26 and 27. One league I want to mention as we wrap, guys. I am officially calling myself out. It is time for Michael Patrick Rooney III to dial in to get after the Big Ten. I know Iowa. We saw them with our own eyes. Iowa's 2-4 in the league. Now I get that they just played Indiana, who apparently, obviously Indiana's good, but the Big Ten is pretty fascinating. Like Penn State, who I think is a good team and almost beat Miami the first weekend. Penn State, I think, is like 1-5 in the league right now. So it's like this league has got, Michigan State 6-3. You've got Maryland, who's gotten hot. I mean, Northwestern's 3-3 in the league. Rutgers is only 2-4. The league is really fascinating to me, and I think we're now at the point of the year where the weather's not the thing anymore, and I can dial in and really start to observe this league. So there you go. Calling myself out, boys.
Coach.
We're gonna have a Big Ten party next week. All right, boys, that's it. That's all. Anybody, any final thoughts? Just happy to be here. Hope we can help the ball club. Let me end this with this. On Twitter, let me see if it's still up. I did the digest what day was that, Fitzy? Friday? I pinched it. Who can say?
Saturday, yeah.
Saturday, as part of the digest, which is, arguably the very best thing that we do amongst some very, very good things. I graded myself out on the digest, and here's what I had. I had 50 vocab. I was a little disappointed in my vocab. My 3 best words in the piece were plethora, buoyed, and vanquished. I think I'm better than that, but go ahead, Fitzy.
Big fan of buoyed, big fan of vanquished. I think plethora is played out, not on plethora.
Yeah, plethora is tired. I wrote it and felt it was tired.
I say that a lot. I'm sorry, guys.
Yep. My tweet usage was elite. I only gave it a 70 because it's not like in a unique play, but my incorporation of tweets in the piece I thought was a 70. I could have graded it higher. It's being a little tough on myself. I thought I was 70 thorough. I covered a lot. Like you had to really put me to sleep to not make the digest. I gave my headline puns a 60. I might have been tough on myself there. Did anyone not see my Pac-12 headliner? It said Pac-12 70s party. Come on, like USC, ASU. Work with me here.
No, I liked it. I don't know if it's a pun, but I liked it. It was a good subhead.
Can I interject with a single thought here before we go?
Please.
So over the last few weeks, we've kind of made jokes about like Indiana State, right? About how like everybody's played them and there are a lot of teams who have beaten them. But how about Mitch Hanna's Sycamores guys? They're now 8-1 in the Missouri Valley with an RPI of 28. They're a postseason team to keep an eye on. If they run away with that league, that non-conference schedule they played will put them in the postseason.
Look, like if I'm Mitch Hanna's, like who by the way is one of my favorite coaches to talk to because he's one of those old school guys who will just say things like, "Yeah, don't like my offense right now." Like he's just very blunt about like
we're not very good. But we have a good
I do some video work with Missouri Valley Conference, and he's always a breath of fresh air because he's just very honest with like where he's at with his team. If I were him though, like I would he's very good at coaching, but I would leave coaching and just open myself up as a consultant to build schedules.
Seriously.
There is guesswork in scheduling. So you can't ever be 100% sure what you're doing is the right formula. But there is no mid-major program out there that does a better job at this than Indiana State. It's every year. In some years, they don't win enough games. But the schedule is always right there. And like it's like pitch perfect every single season.
And it's
I
like
believe
Rain Man
it's-
stuff.
yeah.
Like it's not that easy. Like it's amazing. And the other thing you can set your clock to with Indiana State, fielding percentage. They're 7th in the country. And probably half their games they had to shovel snow off the field. I don't know. Do they get
We
get
should
snow in
have
Terre
the
Haute?
Hefner Hanna School of Scheduling.
Seriously. Consulting business for D1 Baseball. We'll
There
have a
you go.
scheduling arm, and Mitch Hanna will be the CEO of scheduling.
I mean, it's like one of the things that's really simple about it, just quickly on this, is that I think a lot of teams like feel the siren song of like, yeah, we need to go play some home games, whether it's because, you're afraid of the time away for the players or because it's like we want to get our fans into the stadium or whatever. Like they just are not tempted. They don't tempted by that. They're not, I mean, yes, Indiana does have cold weather in the late winter, early spring, but it's not like they're playing it where North Dakota State is playing. And yet Indiana State didn't try to play a home game this year until March 17th. They didn't successfully play one until March 19th because of the weather, but they just are road warriors for like the first 4 weeks of the season every single year. And that just ends up paying dividends.
Yep. Boys, I have a final thought, and then we'll wrap. That's a good podcast right there. The fabulous Rune Dogs were 6-2-2 last weekend, and as Dion would say, we coming. And like that, the fabulous Rune Dogs. That was a breakthrough weekend for us, Fitzy. And so I don't. You're gonna need to bring your A game this week.
How did I do last week?
Irrelevant to me. Anyway.
Nobody cares.
In our locker room, irrelevant.
As Marcus Peters would say, we ain't done yet.
We ain't done yet.
I said we ain't done yet.
I'm a little bit annoyed by the 2 ties because now we got to pick 12 games next week to get back to our even multiples of 10 schedule. So get ready, guys. Buckle up.
Even better. The Rune Dogs get hot, and we got a 12 series week coming right when we're starting to feel it. I love the way this is shaping up. Go Rune Dogs.
Go Rune Dogs.
I meanwhile don't really look at my record on a week to. I mean, I pick the games and I see it, but I don't really pay a lot of attention to it because, in the words of my favorite quote, Ricky Waters, for who, for what?
For what? Ricky, run the waters. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine freshman Ricky Waters yelling, run the waters to Lou Holtz? Oh my gosh. That's great. Boys, well done. We'll have the preview podcast probably Wednesday night. Look out for that. If we do it live, we will try to promote that on social media. That is it. Everyone have a great week. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.